Hi, Steve. So we've seen some significant changes in the process for validation and review of EU health claim dossiers in the last 3 years. Now, these changes have coincided with the introduction of the transparency regulation in 2021. And from my understanding, these have quite profoundly altered both the process for submitting health claims to EFSA, but then also the timelines you now face as a potential applicant.
Hi, Shauni. Yeah, I think unfortunately not all change is always for the better. And like all process-driven change, there are good and bad elements to that. And for us as an industry, but also for individual applicants in general, it's an issue. There's certainly greater transparency has been achieved, I think, through this process, but the overall timelines from a point of submission of a dossier through to the adoption of a scientific opinion have now increased, and they're regularly, 18, 24, commonly 24 months from start to finish, in my experience. And I'm not sure that everybody who's planning these claims is necessarily aware of those timelines.
So I suppose what in this process has changed specifically, and then also where in the process are these additional timelines being seen? Is it the whole process in its entirety is being drawn out, or is it certain parts of the process?
This is the challenge in a way, because in some ways the process itself has remained the same. A health claims dossier is submitted through an EU member state, although that's more notional these days because it's uploaded onto a platform and not actually submitted to that member state. But that's, the technical dossier is uploaded to that central platform. And the first examination of it is just a completedness check, which is performed by the member state before it's presented formally to EFSA.
Okay, so what's involved in that initial completeness check, and how long does that particular step take?
Well, it's, that completeness check is just supposed to be a simple check that the parts of the dossier are all present. And by that, I mean, obviously, the core 6 elements of the dossier together, but also the supporting documentation. So that would be the covering letter, the appendices that go with it, and also perhaps that there's a clear health claim that's within the framework of the regulation. But unfortunately, it's not uncommon even for this initial step to take around a couple of months.
Okay. I know the next stage is for the dossier then to pass to EFSA, who within a couple of weeks, kind of 1 to 2 weeks, will notify the applicant of receipt, and then begins a more detailed validation of the dossier. What does this particular validation step involve?
This is where we're seeing the biggest change. So this is the real core of the matter that we're discussing, I suppose. That validation stage is still not scientific review. It's important to remember that this isn't NDA's panel of scientists reviewing the dossier at that stage, but it's a more detailed look at the content of the dossier, a further series of pre-checks, if you like. And based on the evidence of the last couple of years and the number of the dossiers that we've seen, this validation step, this detailed pre-check, is taking around 12 months to achieve.
I guess we have to remember that there have not been a large number of applications post-transparency regulation, partially due to restrictions placed on human studies and human research by the COVID-19 pandemic, but then also as both EFSA and applicants themselves get used to the whole process. Potentially, these timelines could improve as applicants use the system more and become familiar with the current expectations of EFSA.
Yeah, I think that is true. I think to date it's been common, though, to see these multiple rounds of requests for information during the validation stage, where documents are not in the right format, they're not word searchable PDFs, cited publications might be missing, confidential and non-confidential data are not properly redacted, for instance. And you can argue certainly that that's part of the learning process for the applicants as well. But it's very challenging, it's very complicated, and it's quite a close inspection of the dossier.
Yes, I suppose what's frustrating at this stage, we're 14, 15 months into the process, and the scientific review is yet to start. Isn't this a huge disincentive for new applicants?
Yeah, I feel that really might be the case. But with our experience, I guess we feel that we're probably well placed to support applicants in ensuring that they can provide good technical dossiers and they don't fall into those same mistakes. That's going to be the only way to shorten this validation timeline. To what degree that can be shortened, I'm uncertain. And I'm sure that EFSA would argue that even relatively minor omissions, such as that, missing publications, as I mentioned, are significant in their ability to evaluate it. The problem is just that the process is so slow. Every round of a request for information will add a couple of months to that validation stage.
Not only is the process slow, that most applicants aren't doing this on a regular basis, so I suppose the application itself is going to be a learning curve for them.
Yeah.
So I suppose at this stage, health claim is ready for scientific review. Would it be fair to say that this stage of the process has remained the same over the years?
Yeah, I think it would. That is a true characterization of it. I think the scientific review process is regulated under BC Regulation 1924-2006, and that has certain commitments on EFSA for their review timelines. You know, that's 6 months, 5 to 6 months in legislation window, plus clock stops to complete the scientific review and provide their opinion. So that piece hasn't changed at the end of the day.
So in your experience, you've seen them seem to stick to these timelines for scientific review?
Yeah, I think that process part is essentially unchanged. I think we see more clock stops. So we see EFSA issue a question during the scientific review. You have the clock stop, and again that can add to this timeline unless applicants are very good at a 2-week response and keeping that to a minimum. But yeah, generally the review part is unchanged.
Has the central online platform made this more efficient, do you think?
Yes and no. I think the EFSA Connect part of the portal where the companies or the individuals interact with EFSA, we discussed that in a last one of our last vlogs on how to notify studies. Yeah, that's people understand that. I think it's this second platform, which is the e-submission food chain platform, which is the challenge. I mean, ultimately on this platform is where we build and ultimately submit our submissions online. It's time consuming, and that's the issue I have when I'm explaining it to clients. It's time consuming because of all the summaries, all of the pull down menus you have to do to choose from, and it's just the familiarity with that will increase over time, but for now is taking a lot of hours to achieve.
Thanks, Steve. I think we've had some great insight there into the dossier validation process and the timelines as they stand currently. So I suppose we've covered a series of commonly raised issues pertaining to EFSA health claims over the last number of weeks in our series of short videos. We've covered topics ranging from major reasons for past failure, data requirements, statistics, notification of studies, the dossier review process, and I suppose we'd be happy to address other issues around the health claims process if people would like to raise them.
Absolutely.